for your Spirit that helps us to understand that truth. And I pray that you would open our hearts, our ears, our eyes, and our minds, so we would receive what you have for us this day. Speak through me. Use me to accomplish your purpose, Lord. May we be changed for the hearing of your word this morning. In Jesus' name, amen. We're picking up in verse 8. Last week, Samuel had confronted them with the sin that they had done, and he said he was going to present them with evidence, and he begins to share in verse 8 a very short history of the life of Israel. And if we look in verse 8 and 9, we'll read verse 8 and 9. We're going to be looking at verses 8 through 20 today, but we'll be starting with verses 8 and 9. And if we look at verse 8, believe it or not, in verse 8 is a summation of half of Genesis, all of Exodus, all of Leviticus, all of Numbers, all of Deuteronomy, and all of Joshua in one verse. Now that's the kind of Bible that you can read in one day. And then in verses 9, 10, and 11, he summarizes the book of Judges, which then brings them up to where they are now in the life of Israel. Verse 8 says, after Jacob entered Egypt, they cried to the Lord for help. And the Lord sent Moses and Aaron, who brought your forefathers out of Egypt and settled them in this place. And then verse 9, but they forgot the Lord their God. So he sold them into the hand of Sisera, the commander of the army of Hazor, and into the hands of the Philistines and of the king of Moab, who fought against them. And so we have in those two verses the fact that Jacob, also called Israel, Jacob referring to the nation of Israel, had moved into Egypt and had settled there and had prospered there and had done very well there. But then there arose a Pharaoh who didn't know Joseph and didn't know the history of the Israelites, and he put them in slavery, and they were in slavery for 400 years. And when they cried out to the Lord from there, he delivered them, and then he brought them out of that slavery into the promised land. And in verse 9 it says, they forgot the Lord. The Lord brought them out of that slavery, brought them through the wandering in the wilderness, and brought them into the promised land. And they settled there. The promise, the blessing that God had promised had been fulfilled. And as they settled in there, they got so used to the blessings that they forgot the blesser. They forgot the one who brought the blessings. And it says they forgot the Lord, verse 9. They forgot the Lord their God, so he sold them into the hand of Sisera, the commander of the army of Hazor, and into the hands of the Philistines, and of the king of Moab, who fought against them. And it's interesting, who sold them into the hand of their enemies? Who sold them into the hand of their enemies? God did. God sold them into the hand of their enemies. And there is a teaching out there today, and I don't know if you've run across it, but I've run across it a few times, and it says if there's anything bad that happens in your life, it had to come from Satan. Because God never brings anything bad on his children. And I've heard it go so far as if to say, well, if God was going to put a disease on somebody, he'd have to get it from Satan. That's not true. That's a false teaching. And if you come across it, just be prepared for that. Because right here it says that God sold them into the hand of their enemies. God did that. And I'm going to look at a passage this morning. Put a bulletin or something there in 1 Samuel chapter 12 and flip with me over to the back, towards the back of your Bible to Hebrews. And we're going to be at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. And it's interesting here that in verse 5 it starts out as, have you forgotten the word of encouragement? The word of encouragement that addresses you as sons. And this whole passage is about discipline. A word of encouragement about discipline. I don't really feel very encouraged when I get disciplined. I don't know about you, and I'm sure that my children don't feel encouraged when they get disciplined. And maybe that has something to do with the way that we discipline. Because inherent in the word discipline, we see the word disciple and discipleship. And when we discipline our children, it is for their training. Discipleship means to train, to help them to become like something else, somebody else. A disciple becomes like their teacher. And hopefully as we as parents become like Jesus, our children will become like Jesus as well, because we're training them, we're discipling them. In too many cases, and even in my mind, discipline only has to do with corporal punishment. That's the only thing we think. When we think discipline, we think corporal punishment. But discipline is for our training. It's for us to become better. It's for us to become like the one doing the discipleship. And as my mind works, and as I look at, and if you know, if you can ask anybody in my family, I play all kinds of goofy games with words. And just as an example of that, if you know anything about guitars, Fender is a company that makes guitars, and the little things that pick up the sound are called pickups. And Joel was talking about a guitar last night, and he's like, well, I need to get a better guitar, or maybe I can just get some pickups and put them on my Fender. Fender is the guitar. And I was like, no, Joel. The Fender goes on the pickup. So anyway, that has nothing at all to do with the sermon other than to show the way that my weird mind works and how I like to play games with words. But anyway, this is not a game, but when I look at the word discipline, I see in that word, I see the word disc. Disc. And I know a lot of you are very familiar with discs, and a lot of you use discs on a regular basis. And what does a disc do? What does a disc do? What is the purpose of a disc? A disc is used to go through the field and to break up the ground that has been hardened over winter to prepare that ground for planting. Because the farmer wants to do something useful with that ground, he needs to first break it up. And that's what discipline does for us. Discipline, the discipline of the Lord. Our hearts sometimes get hardened. Our hearts need to be prepared. And why does the farmer do that? Why does the farmer take the effort to go through the field and disc it up? It's because he has a better future in mind for that field. He wants to do something productive with that field. He doesn't want to have just weeds growing there. That's not very useful. He wants to cut up the weeds, break up the soil, get that ground ready for planting. That's what discipline does. That's what discipline does for us. And it says, don't make light of the Lord's discipline. And if you've ever disciplined a child and they give you the whatever, or they roll their eyes and whatever, they've made light of the discipline. They're not accepting the discipline. Thankfully for farmers, the soil doesn't have a choice. The soil doesn't have a choice as to whether it receives the disc. It just does. And can you imagine if the farmer goes through the field and the field says, I don't like that disking. I'm going to go right back to the way I was. That would be pretty annoying. That would be pretty annoying. But we as humans, we can do that. We can refuse the discipline. We can say, no, not interested. We can make light of it. But it says, don't make light of discipline. That's one way to look at discipline, is to make light of it. Say, no, not going to receive it. The other one says, don't lose heart in the discipline. That means, I'm going through this hard time, I don't understand it, I don't get it, I give up.